Walter Graham is, I met him at the Strike a Chord event in Dunstable where he gave a great talk, and he's really delighted that he's joining us now. Afternoon, Walter.
Afternoon, Lila.
How you doing?
Doing good.
Good. For the listeners who may not have heard of you, could you give a little bit about your background and how you came to campaign for, it's Northern Ireland, is it?
Northern Ireland, yeah.
For Northern Ireland, for them to, to stop water fluoridisation, and how you got there, and just a little bit about your background, please.
Yeah, I was doing pharmaceutical marketing at the time that they announced that they were going to bring fluoridation, or that's the addition of fluoride, the chemical fluoride, into the water system here in Northern Ireland. And one of the basic principles of pharmacology is that there is no such thing as a drug that doesn't have side effects. And yet the government was claiming on radio and television and in the newspapers that there was no side effects to putting in what was one of the most toxic substances in the periodic table or on Earth, is the fluoride. And in the form they're putting it in, it's extremely toxic. But none of this was mentioned in the article. They said there was no side effects at all. If they could put this in, 1 part per million, there'd be no effects at all. And that's a lie. That's not possible. Every drug has side effects. Aspirin has 6 or 7 side effects. So everything has side effects. You can't name one that doesn't. Some of them have 30, 40 side effects. And here was one that was the most toxic substance, and they were claiming it had no side effects. So I knew they were lying.
So how long ago was this? Sorry, Walter.
It was about 12 years ago that it actually started for me. And at that point, I just wrote in a letter to the government, and I wrote in a letter to one of the newspapers because I thought I should try and get somebody else to pay attention to this. And the government wrote back with the most silly replies, and I realized we had a problem. They gave us a 3-month consultation period to go before our councils. Our councils were supposed to make the decision. So I then took off time from work, and I went to the councils on the same night as they went to the councils with doctors and dentists and a slideshow and all kinds of stuff with music. It was incredible. And at the end of the 3-month consultation period, I had 25 out of 26 councils vote against water fluoridation. We had the 4 area health and social services councils vote against it. We had NIPSA, the large civil servants union, vote against it. We had the Angling Federation vote against this. We had the 2 farmers unions vote against it. We had the Vegetarian Society against it. Queen's Students Union voted against it. And even Shorts, the large aerospace industry, they threatened to pull out of Northern Ireland if this went ahead. So we had widespread opposition.
Right. Okay. So that was you. So obviously that's not a Northern Ireland accent. How long have you been in Northern Ireland, Walter?
We've been here at least 22 years.
Wow. Okay. So you were doing the pharmaceutical. So how did you get to where you are now and what you're doing now, going around speaking?
Just by sheer perseverance. That's what happened. They didn't give up. After we won all the councils, the government said, we don't care what the councils think. We're going to do it anyway. So then I realized this was going to be a longer battle. I then organized the councils in Northern Ireland into a coalition of councils against fluoridation in order to use public money to sue them. Yeah. They then sent a letter to all the councils saying you can't use money to sue them or we'll put you in jail, this kind of stuff. So then we started networking through the councils, meeting every 2 weeks up at Belfast City Hall, and we started writing to groups to try and get support for what we were doing, trying to stand up against this. So the fight then really started, and I was forced onto television when we started to march. We got people on the street to march. We got placards. We went up to Stormont, which is our Capitol building, and we marched up there. It's about a mile up to the front of the building. So we had about 150 people march up to the front of that building with a coffin that said truth and democracy. That's what was dead. And we had skull and crossbones on it. And we marched up to the front of the Capitol building and we handed in documents proving fluoride was harmful, scientific studies. They refused to even answer any of our questions, which we had put in. They refused to stop, so we marched again. About 4 weeks later, we marched on Stormont again. Again, we appeared on television. Then we did a march to the health board And we did a protest in front of the health board. Then we did a protest on Royal Avenue. And suddenly they saw that we were serious, and they backed out. They were afraid of the publicity. That's the last thing they want. The government doesn't want you to look at this. They don't want you to pay attention to it. They want you to stay asleep and let them put it in.
Well, yeah, fluoridation only really stands up to no scrutiny, because once you start looking into it even remotely, you realize that the positives, which I think are mostly bogus anyways, are certainly not worth the massive risks that it takes. I mean, even if you just look at the 1 part per million, which is the sort of harmless figure that they always throw out there, there's no physical way that they can make sure that one house gets 1 part per million next to the next, because they're basically dumping bags or barrels of this into the water supply, and some houses will end up getting massive concentrations of it, and others will be luckier and have less. So, I mean, it's just madness. But
and
sorry, I was just going to say, do you want to run through the list of dangers, or just give the listeners some of the dangers that fluoride that's involved with water in the fluoride in the water?
Well, I should clear one thing up first, because there's a misconception. A lot of times when you say fluoride, people think of chlorine, the chemical that they're adding into the water system to purify the water, to kill off pathogens or viruses and stuff. That's not what this is. This is fluoride, which is only being put in specifically. They say it might, and I repeat, might, reduce tooth decay in small adolescent children. That's the excuse they use to put this in. But the scientific studies that are actually out there, and this is going to be the hard bit for your listeners to believe, prove that there's almost 4,000 studies. They prove that it causes osteoporosis, arthritis, it causes irritable bowel syndrome, it causes thyroid dysfunction, even depression. It causes all kinds of other illnesses, including cancers of different kinds. It causes an increase in cancers of all kinds. It causes neurological damage and lowered IQs in children, and I don't know if I said it, but thyroid dysfunction. So you've got a huge list of things, and I could probably go on, of ailments that are attached to it.
Oh, isn't it classed as even more poisonous to the brain as mercury, I've read recently?
Yeah, it's more toxic than lead.
And there was the Harvard paper that just recently came out that even pretty much said so.
Yes, they said that it did damage to the brain of children or anybody that takes this. It does neurological damage, and there's now 26 peer-reviewed published studies that show that fluoride lowers children's IQs. And I'm going to read from one of them, just the first sentence, which is quite shocking. Now, there's 3 studies were done in China in a row, and the Chinese couldn't believe the first results. They did studies comparing fluoridated with non-fluoridated areas, looking at children's intelligence compared to their parents' intelligence and so on. And they found that fluoride reduced the children's intelligence by something nearing 15 points. And it says, this is the first line of the study, a Chinese study now. It says, it has been reported that fluoride can penetrate the fetal blood-brain barrier and accumulate in cerebral tissue before birth, thereby apparently affecting children's intelligence. So now you're telling me we're putting something in the water supply that can jump the placenta, penetrate the fetal blood-brain barrier, and accumulate in the cerebral tissue of a fetus before birth. Now, does this sound like it has anything to do with teeth? This is incredible what they're doing. And there's no science backing up anything that they're telling you. That's the amazing thing.
There's
but you
some
don't
sort of pseudo-science that, it helps when there's not actually any data that I've ever seen to prove it. And even if it was, if it had a topical benefit, it would be akin to drinking suntan lotion, to prevent skin sunburn. It's just...
Yeah. Well, you see, here's the ridiculous part of it. This is passing the teeth at 100 miles an hour when you drink it.
Yeah.
It doesn't come in with a little tag that says teeth only. It's water soluble. It's going into every cell of your body. Now, it has access to every cell of your body. And you're telling me, magically, it finds its way only to your teeth. And it drastically changes them, making them harder. but it touches nothing else in the whole human body. Does that sound possible or likely? It's an impossibility. Of course, if it can drastically change your teeth, it must be drastically changing other things too, because it's in every cell of your body now.
Absolutely. And the thing is, I mean, there's an interesting something. We've got a little chat box going, and someone said they don't force us to drink the water. But I mean, that's every human being's right, that we have to pay our water rates. We have to pay for the water. I mean, really, surely it's everybody's human right
not to
be able
poisoned.
to have access to water.
Absolutely, and you can't avoid it. I don't care where you are. If they put this in the water system, you're going to get it. Because once it's in the water, it's in your pasta. Once it's in the water, it's in your rice. Once it's in the water, it's in every food or beverage that is manufactured using that water supply. Plus, you're going to bathe in it. You're going to have showers in it. You're going to, it's going to be in your clothing because you're going to wash your clothes in it. There's no way you're going to avoid this. And of course, even if you got a distillation unit or some kind of a reverse osmosis for your house to avoid it, you'll get it when you go out. You'll go at somebody's house or you'll get it in a restaurant. There's no way to avoid this stuff. Once they start putting it in the water supply, you're going to get it. So, the other thing I'd say too, just to clarify this thing even further, which I think is kind of outrageous. You've got the dentists who are promoting this like crazy, don't you? You know,
I got told when I told the dentist that I didn't let my kids use fluoride. She told me she was disgusting and she considered it a form of neglect.
Yeah,
that's what she told me. I mean, obviously, I went straight away and changed dentist. But I mean, she made me feel so shitty, as I was walking out there, because I want to protect my children. I don't want them using the toothpaste. We're lucky where we're living down in the southwest that at the moment our water isn't fluoridated. So, well, not that we're aware. James?
Well, no, apparently not. But they're very vague on it. So, what we found is instead of being public with, saying, oh, we're fluoridating, isn't it great for you? They're trying to be as vague as possible to sort of avoid answering the questions. But as far as I've been able to tell so far, we've just got the chlorine to deal with at the moment.
Well, here's my point. Dentists are promoting this, and let's face it, when you go to the mechanic, does he tell you how to fix your car? No, of course he doesn't, because if he told you how to fix your car, you'd never go back. You'd just fix your own car, wouldn't you? Now you want me to believe that dentists are promoting something that if it worked, they put this in the water supply, and it actually worked, it would finish off dentistry altogether. There wouldn't be any cavities at all. And you telling me dentists want this? Of course, this doesn't make sense. I mean, and you don't see dentists out in front of Cadbury's or down at Coca-Cola protesting, wanting warning labels on their tins, do you?
No, I think there's a fundamental ignorance with fluoridation in that many of the dentists and the technicians and the assistants, they go through this school much the same way our doctors do, where they're very sort of they're kept with blinkers on to the reality of the situation. They're told what drugs to prescribe for what ailment, but not why is that ailment there? Is it a mineral or vitamin deficiency? What are the environmental causes for this ailment? It's very much product based, and from what I've experienced with dentists, many of them they're completely unaware of the dangers. And when they do find out, and they read the studies, and they take time to go from their mandated education or the mandated refresher courses and things, and they actually take the time out to read up the actual studies, they're absolutely shocked and disgusted that they've been misled so bad. But the problem is of course getting not only the dentist, which I think, to be honest, fluoride in toothpaste, you can avoid that if you want. It's not. There are alternatives, and you're not swallowing it. No. I've swallowed fluoride toothpaste before because I never knew there was dangers up until the last 7 or 8 years. But I mean, obviously, that there is a limit to the effects that can have on you. But with fluoridation in the water, you don't even have to be drinking it. You can buy a £500 filter system for your drinking water, but you're going to get just as much in the showers. There's so many places that we're forced to use municipal water supplies, and you can't have a filter with you every time. It seems madness to me that you would add
bottled water now.
Yeah, and they're putting it in bottled water.
But Paul on the chat box has just said, they're talking about adding lithium.
Yeah,
to the water.
That's right. That's right. In the Republic of Ireland, they're actually considering at the Dáil level, which is their parliament buildings, adding lithium to the drinking water to relieve the depression that could possibly be caused by the fluoride they've been adding, but we don't know. I just know that they're looking at the possibility of drugging you with something else. Once you give them the right to do this, they'll come up with some other stupid idea like birth control pills going in or, it's just nutty. You've got the whole population drinking a drug for a condition they may not even have. Because why? Because there's a small group of kids somewhere who don't brush their teeth, who eat a lot of sweeties, and they drink nothing but sugary, fizzy drinks all the time. Well, if they're drinking fizzy drinks all the time, they're not drinking the water supply. So there's no point putting it in for them. The target audience don't drink water. That's why they have a tooth problem. Mm-hmm. So this is how stupid it is. And if you look at this on another illogical point, they're putting fluoride in 100% of the water. This costs millions, by the way, and I'm talking in the Republic of Ireland, it costs about $7 million a year just to dump this acid in, right? Mm-hmm. So they're spending the $7 million, and 40% of it is lost in underground leaks before you even get it. And so it's 40% of all your tax money going out in the environment. Out of the 60% that's left, industry and farming use 7/8 of the whole water supply. So it's 7/8 of the 60% that's going to farming and industry. And out of that 1/8 that comes into your house, you drink less than 1% of it. You flush the toilet, you wash your clothes, you water the lawn, but you're not drinking it. So you're drinking about 1% of that 1/8. Now, how many children in the whole population have this really bad tooth problem we're trying to cure? It's about 3% of the population. So you've now got 3% of the population drinking 3% of 1% of 1/8 of 60% of all the water you bother to fluoridate. Does this sound like a logical way to deliver a drug to a small target audience who don't even drink the water supply? The whole thing is insanity.
I mean, personally, I think that the real reason that they're putting it in there is it's a convenient way to get rid of toxic waste. But we have a question from Samaraj, and he's asking, do you have any solutions that you would suggest that people are taking it in any place? Because even if you're not fluoridated, you definitely don't want that to. You don't want your area to become fluoridated.
Yeah, I mean, you're doing you've got a big campaign, haven't you, going? And what people, like in Southern Ireland, what can they do?
Yeah, well, we're organising in Southern Ireland, and I would advise them to look at, there's now a new report that has come out, which you can download, even in digital form, and send into your council. And it's a 300-page report with 1,200 peer-reviewed studies, published studies showing harm from fluoride covering all the diseases and disorders we talked about. And you can get that at www.enviro.ie. And that study is downloadable, and you can then send it into your councils right now before this ever hits them. And ask them to take a look at this, ask them to take a presentation, tell them that you withdraw your consent to be drugged against your will, and that you're not going to allow your water system to deliver drugs. That's just got to be stopped.
Have you experienced, much backlash, not from the councils or the government itself, but from obviously there's a commercial entity that they make their money from putting this junk into our water supplies. They sell it as a product, because if they didn't sell it as a product, they would have to spend a lot of money to actually dump it as toxic waste. So have you actually come in contact with any of these sorts of organizations, or have they just basically dealt with the government and you've had to deal with the government?
It's the government. They've dealt with the government, don't you worry. They're into our government big time. Our government don't represent us. You're bound to know that by now.
Yeah.
So they do represent the commercial enterprise, though, big time. And so these guys pay for re-election campaigns. They do all kinds of things for the government. And plus they raise taxes. They are the government, really. Large corporations are the government. And that's what's happening right now. They don't represent us in the slightest. Otherwise we wouldn't be doing wars in other countries, and we wouldn't be closing hospitals. And yet this is the funny thing. They're closing hospitals all over the place, and people still want to believe that the government cares about them.
Well, yeah, and
they keep people sick as well, doesn't it? Do you know what I mean? Big business.
Samraj asked this: Have you tried to sue any of the authorities that are pushing this? Or I guess it's not the local authorities because they agreed with you, right? So it's
yeah. I'll tell you, there was one lawsuit that happened in Southampton not that long ago. And they lost their lawsuit on some technicality of some kind, but or they possibly even won, I'm not sure. But what happened is that the government wrote in 2 laws in England now, in Parliament. One of them says that if they order the water department to fluoridate, despite what the population want, they have to fluoridate. And the second law says that if there is anybody gets any side effects from fluoride, they can't sue.
Which I always think is a big red flag, and you get this with the vaccine companies that get exemptions from any lawsuits. From if they stand by their products so much, and it's so harmless that they're going to force medicate the entire nation, then surely that should be the last thing that is put into legislative acts. Is that you've got. That they're exempt from this. I know in the States they were getting a lot of ground with the small councils. Basically, people were getting active, going to their councils.
Yeah, but the federal get involved.
And they were also suing the water boards that were actually doing this. And there were so many cases that were won that they just started to stop fluoridation because they were losing these cases. They could not prove that the benefits outweighed the risk. Now, then what happened was the federal government came in and they said, well, we want to mandate this, and it's above local, which sounds exactly what they've done with Walter in Ireland, is that they remove that choice from the local account, and of course locally, those politicians, no matter how crooked they are, maybe, they're directly accountable to the people in that area. When it's this nebulous sort of government agency, then you have difficulty because you can't get anybody accountable because it's always someone else's department. So that's where this sort of outlet and the media in general, just to get it out there, so that the voices are nationwide instead of just locally.
Yeah, well, there's one side effect I didn't mention, and this has to do with dentistry. Believe it or not, fluoride, the one side effect that the government do admit to is a disease called dental fluorosis caused by fluoride. The only thing on earth that can cause this is fluoride. Now, if this was television, I'd put up a picture of it and you'd both sort of back off from the screen, because it's quite horrific if you see a really bad case of this. What it does is it causes white flecking, and like white spots to appear horizontally across the bottoms of the teeth, and then it creates brown staining and pitting, actual holes in the face of the tooth, right? So fluoride actually causes this dental damage, and in the Republic of Ireland, their government admit that 50% of the entire population now have this dental disfigurement called dental fluorosis, another dental disease that never existed before they started fluoridating. So you're telling me we traded off a few cavities for 3% of the population, but we gave 50% of the population a new oral disease that never existed before. And this oral disease has implications to bone, to neurological damage, to cancer, and so on. And you know how they've been claiming, the dentists claim that it makes hard teeth. Well, yes, it does. But our hard teeth, the teeth are the only visible part of your skeleton. If it's making hard teeth, is it not also likely it's making hard bones, which is osteoporosis and arthritis? And who leads Europe in osteoporosis? The Republic of Ireland have 40% higher osteoporosis rate than Northern Ireland. And they actually have a 40% higher neurological damage society than Northern Ireland, and in fact, all of Europe. So you've got them leading in 18 different cancers. This is amazing. But the Republic of Ireland, their own cancer data, it's called a cancer atlas, All Ireland Cancer Atlas. And they did 18 maps of where the cancers appear, both north and south of Ireland. And now the north doesn't have fluoride. The south does. Green is the color for very little cancer. Purple is a lot of cancer. And in pancreatic cancer, prostate cancer, in leukemia, in all of these different cancers, the whole of Northern Ireland stays green, and right to the imaginary borderline, suddenly it starts turning purple all the way down. The maps are quite horrific, and they have 18 maps, all of them in all cancers. They are bigger in a quantity of cancers in the Republic of Ireland than Northern Ireland. 40% in most cancers. In some cancers, they're 2 times our rate. Now, why? We're all on the same piece of land. We're breathing the same oxygen. Genetically, we're the exact same people. What are they doing differently to their entire society that it could end right at the borderline like that? It could only be fluoridation. We're not fluoridating. They've been doing it for 45 years. That's what it is, really. There could be nothing else. And that's what this 300-page report is saying as well. And that's been sent into the government now. So I think you're going to see some changes happening here, but it's going to take some action. And right now, there are a couple of legal cases that are coming forward. So there's going to be legal challenges going in October, as far as I know. So we'll see some action here. Watch this space, I would say.
Yeah, Michael just is a listener, and he's local to us at Liberty Tactics here. And he actually just sent me the Southwest Water statement on fluoride, yeah. And they're basically saying that it's the responsibility of each region's strategic health authority to identify areas where fluoridation may be beneficial. And according to Section 58 of the Water Act 2003, it states that companies have a duty to fluoridate when asked to by the SHA, which...
There you go.
So that's it. They've got that out to tender, and they give a phone number. It's 0800 169 1144 if you're in the southwest. But basically, that's what it's going to take, is people starting to flood these people's switchboards and letting them know that you do not consent to this.
So Walter, if people want to start getting behind you and what you're doing, have you got a website? How can people sort of, get involved with what you're doing, and where are you at the moment? Where's the campaign at the moment with you?
Yeah, well, the campaign, we're just starting up on a more structured campaign. What we've been doing is fighting this in little regions all across Ireland. There are people in Northern Ireland who are fighting to try and stop it from coming in here. And then there's groups in Kerry, in Galway, Mayo, Dublin, Wicklow, and so on, all over Ireland. So we're trying to consolidate those groups as I speak. We have formed a larger grouping. We just met in Castlebar about a week ago, and we're starting to form strategy and how we're going to go forward as one group as opposed to all these smaller groups. Because the smaller groups are only effective in their one little area, and we want to see this out of all of Ireland. So we're just starting to get into the mode of this. So I don't actually have a website that I can hand you at this exact second, which is pathetic, but we're getting there. We've got somebody who's working on the website at the moment. So I'll come back to you on that, and when I do, you could put it out on air then. The only other way people can get in touch with me is if they want to email you or to Skype you, and then you pass them on to me, or you can pass out my...
Yeah. I mean, people get involved with Liberty Tactics. I mean, we'll have this show on libertytactics.com website. We will put that link you sent us.
Yeah, we'll be happy to host any website you have or anything. Because I mean, to be honest, I think water is essential. It's I lived in a fluoridated area when I lived in Canada for a few years, and believe me, you notice the difference. Anything that we can do to help, just get in contact with us, because
we'll keep getting Walter on.
I get quite sort of frustrated with it, because I know so many people who are, they try. It's very, very difficult once it's in the water supply to avoid it, to filter it. It's a nightmare, and it's ridiculous because it's something that it's just them not putting this waste in there in the first place.
It's easier to stop them putting it in than it is to get it back. So you better put up the fight now before it comes to your area, because believe me, it's coming to your area. They didn't pass these two laws not to start implementing this. They intend to do this. Now, I've got a couple of things for you. One that's of enormous importance in all of this. One is just, I want to clear up a point as well. What they're putting in the water isn't fluoride anyway. That's the joke of it. The government are saying they're putting in fluoride. No, they're not. They're putting in an acid, a highly corrosive, toxic waste of the phosphate fertilizer and aluminium industry, and it's called hydrofluorosilicic acid. Hydrofluorosilicic acid. That's what they're actually putting in. And now this acid is more corrosive than sulfuric acid. And to give you an idea of just how potent this acid is, I show a film from the BBC showing a truck, a big tanker that broke open in Florida of this acid. And what happened was the acid can eat through stainless steel, fiberglass, concrete. The only thing it can't eat through is epoxy plastics. So they have to line the inside of the tanker with epoxy plastics. Well, this one tanker had a pinhole in the epoxy plastic lining, and the acid ate through the half-inch steel plating of the side of the truck, dribbled down, and then it dissolved the axle off the truck and the tires, and the whole thing split open on the highway and poured out thousands of gallons of this stuff, and it dissolved the highway. And they evacuated 2,000 homes around that truck because they were afraid if this became airborne, it would have killed everybody. And the first 50 firefighters and so on who showed up, and police who showed up, all raced to hospital with inhalation problems and burns and all kinds of things happening. So this is the same stuff that they're putting into your water supply. That's the same chemical they intend to add. We took some of that from a water treatment plant, and we had it analyzed at an independent lab in Dublin. And it turned out to have uranium in it. It turned out to have mercury, lead, arsenic. It had aluminium. It had antimony. And yeah, it had some fluoride in it. But you know, it's not fluoride. It had 28 different contaminants, all of them toxic.
Well, fluoride is a general sort of product name, isn't it?
What kind of acid was it you said? Sorry.
Hydrofluorosilicic acid.
Right, okay. And someone also just can they test for fluoride when they're at home?
Yeah, you can send. You have to send it off to a lab. There is talk of now a new little swatch. You know, like you could put a little stick in the water and it'll turn a color and tell you if there's fluoride in it. So that's coming out, but I don't have any of those at the minute to be able to tell you where to get them.
For those listeners who don't know, fluoride is a waste product, a byproduct.
How's it made? Exactly.
But basically, the reason why uranium is in there is because a lot of fluoride comes from uranium mining.
Right.
So you've got huge doses of radiation in many water supplies because of the fluoride being radioactive, basically.
Well, how is it made, Walter?
Well, what happens is, for a lot of industry produce this. You know, coal burning even produces it. So you have a lot of industry, especially the nuclear power industry produce it. The phosphate fertilizer and the aluminium industry produce it. And what happens is they're not allowed by international law to release this into the atmosphere, the fumes, because they're so toxic. And if they landed on the fields around the factory, they'd kill off all the animals. So what they've done is they have these scrubbers in the chimney, and they capture all the gases as they pass. And then at the end of the night, they wash out these scrubbers with sulfuric acid, and it makes an acid slurry called hydrofluorosilicic acid. And that's the exact same stuff that they're directly taking from those chimneys and taking straight to your water supply and dumping it in. And when you look at 99.9% of it goes down the toilet somewhere, it's incredible how much of this stuff they're putting back in the environment. Mm-hmm. So bypassing international law, which doesn't allow them to release it into the environment, they're making you pay for it, so they're turning their garbage into gold, and they're passing it through the community kidneys.
Well, this is not just limited to fluoride, but this general mindset, even down to a lot of the cleaning products, detergents. So many of them are basically chemical dump waste, and by putting it into a product, they basically remove the liability of disposing of it properly. Yeah. And people have to. I mean, it's one of those things that people assume doesn't exist because you have this assumption that things are safe for you, and that by the time it gets to market for you to be able to buy it, there is some sort of magical fairy department in the government that will make sure that, you know, things are safe for you, but they're not. And until you actually start seeing where a lot of these products come from, it's shocking.
Yeah, well,
yeah, as you say, fluoride is, well, it's deadly.
Well, I'll tell you, the other thing you brought me to the next point, which was I was going to lead us to anyway, was that there is the problem with fluoride is it's never been tested. They can't test this hydrofluorosilicic acid. It's too toxic, it's too poisonous, and it's too acidic. I mean, it eats through all their equipment. So they have trouble with it, and so they can't test it. So what they do is they bring it in as a cosmetic and toiletry. Because if they brought it in as a drug, as a medicine, which it is, it would require safety testing, wouldn't it? Mm-hmm. But if they bring it in as a cosmetic and toiletry, there's no safety testing required and or no proof that it's effective. So all the cosmetics and toiletries would be taken off the shelves if you had to prove them all safe and effective. There wouldn't be any cosmetics for the most part. So they allowed it to come in as a cosmetic and toiletry. Now the problem is a new EU decision has just been made through the Court of Justice in 2005 in Germany. For some reason, some community brought an action in Germany about fluoridated water. And it turns, the judge ruled that fluoride is a drug. And because they're making medical claims for it, so it's a medicine. And no matter what it is put into, that now becomes a medicine. So if they put it in the water now becomes a medicine. And the European Court of Justice now requires that all products that this gets put into must be tested as a drug, as a medicine, or they can't be sold. And so the water can't be handed out, and any product that's put into now cannot be exported to any country in the EU, which means that the Republic of Ireland right now, who's the 2% of Europe who've done this, 98% of Europe, by the way, have rejected this or banned it in law. So the 2%, which is mostly the Republic of Ireland, if somebody pushes this and suddenly the French find out about that ruling, they could have every product in Ireland banned. They could have their milk, their cheese, their butter, even their cattle who are fed this stuff. I mean, they could have everything. It would destroy the economy of the Republic of Ireland, and they've taken this risk in doing this. And now, because they fluoridated every product. Their pasta is fluoridated. Everything they export is fluoridated now, virtually. And they can't take it back out. And if England starts going down the same route, they'll start having their products banned too. Because you know what if the French found out, that they'd just do it to get them out of the marketplace, and they'd take over the market.
And so, to be honest, we'd sort of deserve it because, you know, one thing you got to say for the French, they've been burning down GMO test crop fields, and
yep.
You know, at least they've got some sort of gumptions to realize, you know, that they're getting poisoned. This isn't that they have to listen to too many Spice Girls CDs. This is something that's actually going to kill you.
What's wrong with you and the Spice Girls?
Well, I had to watch them at the Olympics closing, but you know, this is not trivial. This is life and death. Fluoridation. A lot of these GM crops that they go past any sort of safety testing. It's so dangerous, and people don't even have that survival instinct to say, "Look, this is actually going to kill us."
Yeah.
So any recourse that we can have to put the brakes on this sort of thing.
Yeah. Well, here's another little tip for you, which is just astounding. As I told you, 98% of Europe have rejected this and or banned it in law. And in fact, Holland rewrote its constitution never to have this again. And believe it or not, the Republic of Ireland has been getting its acid from Holland, because Holland, their phosphate fertilizer industry still has a dumping problem. So what do they do with it? They can't sell it in Holland because it's, you know, nobody in Europe will take it. So they ship it over to Ireland, and the Irish eat it for them. Now, how incredible is that?
I've read before reports of, I think it was in New Zealand when they started to bring in fluoridated water, and there was actually livestock dying.
Yes,
because they were drinking, of course, the fluoridated water. It's one of those things that is hard to believe. So really, I think a lot of it is about just trying to get as much information. Obviously, the mainstream media, if there was a single program on the BBC showing the dangers of it, the public opinion would be made up, because there really isn't many pros to this. But obviously that's not going to happen, because there are a bunch of criminals there. So it's going to take the alternative media to try and spread awareness so much that that they just can't get away with it, because obviously the people making these decisions are either completely ignorant, or they know that they've got enough money in the bank to buy all the filtration. Meanwhile, everyone else gets poisoned to death. So, I think it's really time to sort of start organising and getting some. We're behind you 110%. Getting some real public awareness and one big giant organisation that if we have to take these guys to court and sue their asses off, then we will,
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, maybe Walter will just do a little article and we can get it up on Liberty Tactics.
Yeah, as much as possible.
And we'll try and get it to the column and Liberty Tactics everywhere. And
we'll get the UK column on it as well, because, I mean, really, it's getting to the point now where there's enough public awareness of it, or, the public's even questioning it when I don't think they would have 10, 15 years ago, because there wasn't the information there. That they're starting to become duplicitous in how they put it through, and it's going to become a point of fact that they'll just suddenly be fluoridating if we don't proactively put a kibosh on it. Yes, you may speak, Louise.
Thank you. I've got a question. Oh my God, what happened there? I had a question. Over in Ireland, everybody, and over here, people loving they're loving their Guinness. What's the stance? Because when I go in, and like last night when we were out at this event, people were ordering Guinness that I was with, and I said, it's got fluoride in. Don't touch it. And they said, no, not the stuff that's brewed over here in the UK, just the stuff brewed in Ireland. Would you agree? How would you do this? Would you agree with this?
It depends on where it is brewed. That is a fact. But then in England, you see, Newcastle, Birmingham, they're fluoridated. They've been fluoridated for 40 years or 35 years at least. So it depends on where it's bottled. A lot of this, that's certainly Dublin is fluoridated. So if it comes from the south of Ireland, you've got a fair high chance of it being fluoridated. We actually took some Guinness at the time, had it tested, and it came out as being fluoridated. So they're just using the tap water or from the river, that's what they're doing. They're just using tap water to make the Guinness. Now, it depends on what's in your tap water, If this was gin, it would be distilled out, but it's not. It's beer. And so, you're getting a lot of these trace elements jumping across, and they're going to be in your beers. They're going to be in everything once they put this in. That's the incredible part of this, And when I was talking about Europe, you would think that the Republic of Ireland, who've been doing this for 45 years, would have the best teeth in all of Europe, wouldn't you? Well, no, they don't. There are a large number of other countries in Europe who have better teeth than the Republic of Ireland, and they're not drugging the whole population against their will to get them. So there's another way of doing this. There's education. There's diet. There's looking at all kinds of other things other than dumping drugs into the water system and then having massive side effects. So if Europe aren't doing this, something is wrong. 98% of Europe refused to do this. And the last country that had it was actually Switzerland. They had done one city. And then they checked, and they found that city had the highest cancer rate in Switzerland. And it also had the highest dental decay rate. So they went, by God, if this stuff worked, they would have had the lowest dental decay rate. But no, they had the highest. So they took it out. And just about 6 months before they did, Belgium actually banned, their health minister banned all chewing gum that had fluoride in it, drops, tablets, all kinds of products they banned off the market because they said that the fluoride would cause cancer and osteoporosis. So, there's a lot of people who are going to sue over this when it's eventually finally accepted. And that's what the government's afraid of. You see, they can see that if they ever admit that it causes osteoporosis, I mean, how many people have osteoporosis? I mean, in the Republic of Ireland, it's virtually every other one. And they've actually said on the news that 50% of the women over 50 in the Republic of Ireland will all get osteoporosis. Now, why? They said they don't know why. Well, if you stop putting in toxic waste into your water supply, it might go a long way to solving this. So they are actually causing the hard teeth, which is the hard bones, and there's 13 international studies that show that you have a higher hip fracture rate in fluoridated areas than non-fluoridated. And all of these things are peer-reviewed studies. There's nothing more solid in science than peer-reviewed. So they know that there's damage being done here, but they can't admit it now because they've been doing this for 45 years. If they stop now, they'll get lawsuits. So they're just going to keep on pushing for this and keep it going as long as they can just to avoid the litigation. Because, again, it causes irritable bowel, thyroid dysfunction. You start naming it all off. If everybody started suing, it'd be the end of the government.
Yeah, well, because fluoride isn't one basic contaminant either. There's so many different nebulous ingredients to make up the product sodium fluoride that the health effects are such a wide spectrum. The only way that you can know that you're free of it is if you have no access to fluoridated water. So it really is a massive time bomb, and these guys that are sort of signing their constituents onto this sort of thing are in for a rude awakening once this kicks off, because no matter what they say and what the propaganda may push, it's out. People know just how deadly this is.
Yeah.
So as far as the water in the supplies go, people that are listening can of course find out from their local supplier and also voice their opinion that they do not want anything to do with it. Other than that, are there any products that you're aware of that are more fluoridated? I know in America they have a whole series of baby waters which have got many times the amount of fluoride that is even in the tap water. There's a lot of the baby formulas have got lots of
Paul's just posted said about baby formula. I can't believe that.
And there was another product, it's gone off the top of my head, that they've added it to. So is there any products that stand out that our listeners can say, right, we'll put a kibosh on that product, or because really that's
an announcement out and get
we need to
there.
start hitting these guys in the wallet that if they're going to poison us, we're just not buying their product. And
I would say a lot of the soap detergents, believe it or not, these commercial ones have fluoride in them. There's a lot of the other problem you have is that fluoride is used as a killing agent in a lot of pesticides. Mm-hmm. Most pesticides and herbicides have fluoride in them, and rodenticides, that kill rodents and stuff, will have fluoride in them. So it's going to be in a lot of food if you don't start getting organic. Smoking, believe it or not, tobacco is one of the most heavily sprayed products on the market, and so it has fluoride in it. It's unavoidable because the fluoride is the killing agent in a lot of these pesticides. So it's hard to avoid this stuff, and you've got to start looking at organic as a source. We do. We eat nothing but organic in our house just to try and avoid as much contact with this stuff. And the secret to me is cutting down on the amount, because you're getting it from so many sources that the more you cut down, the less of this stuff comes in, and the easier it is for your body to handle it. It's less of a body burden. So I would get a distillation unit. They're very cheap. You can go online and put in a water distillation unit, and it'll come up. You'll find China sell them, and they're less than €100 for a distillation unit. So it'd be like 80 pounds would get a distillation unit, and it does for, say, 8, 9, 10 years, something like that it'll run, and it's just like a kettle. It just brings the water to a slight, heats it up till it turns to vapor, and then it goes through a stainless steel coil, and a fan blows cold air over it, and it condenses now into pure water. And all of the contaminants, the fluoride, the aluminium, and anything else they put in, end up in the bucket, and then you just wash them out.
Yeah, I've actually got a distiller here, and I've got a gravity-fed filter, which, to be honest, I use the gravity-fed filter for the majority of my drinking water just because it's much faster, and we're not fluoridated here. Although I know distilled water, if you've ever, people won't even, you can't even describe when you've distilled water and you open up that lid and you see what is left. That isn't water that's been left at the bottom of the, it'll make you throw up almost, the stench of the slime at the bottom. And that's not even with fluoride,
Actually, I want to ask Kevin a question about distilled water.
Right.
Is it good, normal distilled water, is it good to drink? Because I haven't been very well recently, and people keep telling me to drink lots of distilled water. But then I went and Googled it, and then I saw all these dangers of drinking distilled water. What's your thoughts on that?
My kids have never drunk anything else. And my son's 20, my daughter's 19. They're the healthiest kids in their class. They never got ill. My daughter had to pretend to be ill through school to try and get a day off. They never got ill. When something went through the school, our kids never got it. Of course, they haven't been vaccinated either, but they've been drinking distilled water all their lives. And everything was cooked in distilled water as well. So
to get, if I wanted to go and get, because I went into a garage and bought a bottle of distilled water, and it was, do I drink this or not? And everyone down at the column was going, oh, Lou, it looks like a bottle of bleach, and can that be done?
Yeah, of course. I've only ever been drinking it. And I'll tell you, all of the boxers and people like that, like Muhammad Ali, in his own biography, he never drank anything else but distilled water through his boxing career, because you have to have pure. You cannot have all of this chemicals coming in on you. It makes a huge difference to your performance. And the other thing is, people say, well, there's no minerals in the distilled water. Well, I'd tell you that at least a third, if not nearly a half of the world's population drink rainwater. And there's not a mineral in it either. And I haven't heard of them dying of lack of minerals.
No, I mean, we have a health expert who comes on, and we'll get him onto TNS soon, called Clive de Carl. And, I mean, he's always saying the importance of actually getting, other sources for your minerals, for your magnesium, for your iodine. I mean, I take all of Clive's products, from magnesium, iodine, fulvic acid anyway, because we don't get enough minerals into our body anyway.
No.
So, right, I'm going to drink my bottle of... is it deionized? Sorry, James. Deionized is the same thing, yeah?
Well, the distilled water. Now, the other thing with it is you can add in, when you get it out of the distillation unit, you can give a little squeeze of lemon juice into it. That makes it more alkaline. So it, just in case it's acidic in any way at all, it makes it alkaline. Makes it more acceptable for your body, too. And it also mineralizes it again. You can put in a couple of grains of salt. That's what we do. So you're putting a little mineral back in, and you're also alkalining it.
Deionized is the same thing, yeah?
Deionized.
Oh, it's just a name that they call distilled water in the auto. In the auto places that Lou frequents. So basically, it's another great tip. So you would say distilled is much better than gravity fed. And what about the time? Like the distiller that I've got will take about 10 hours to do.
Oh wow! No, mine
about 5 liters. Is that?
Oh well, yeah. Mine does 4.5 liters in 3 hours.
All right. So
sorry, someone's just said, is there a good name brand water distiller that you could recommend, Walter?
They're almost all made by the same manufacturers in China. So if you get one, get the cheapest. Because as long as the interior of the thing is stainless steel, that's what you're looking for, stainless steel.
That would be my concern with drinking it from the auto body plate, the auto shop. It isn't so much that...
The BPA.
Just BPA or whatever else is lining the plastic. The water itself will be the same because distilled is distilled, but...
Yeah, but it's going to...
I mean, if you can do it at home in a stainless steel distiller, then you don't have to worry about the junk that's coming out from the plastic.
Yeah, the plastics are putting out a stuff called phthalates, which is a female estrogen hormone, a synthetic version of it. And they've tracked it to causing the increase in breast cancer. Mm-hmm. I have a film here with Olivia Newton-John on it. She did a documentary about it. She went to Mount Sinai in New York, to the hospital there, because they were the first people who tracked the plastics causing breast cancer. So these plastics leach chemicals. And
in certain countries, they're banning these. I find it amazing that we're in this we're in this global society that they want to make like, one world government and all this sort of thing. And we've still, so if we're all in that, we're all working together, then surely if several nations say, look, this is a deadly chemical, this is killing people, and we banned it, everyone else would be rushing around and say, oh my God, that's really bad. But they're not. They're just covering it up harder.
Totally.
So it really is up to us all to sort of spread the word and say, right, this is going to kill, this is going to kill. One thing I wanted to touch on, because it's getting up to the end of the show.
Okay.
The
20 minutes.
Well, yeah, but it's a big subject. The fluoridation in fertilizers. This is massive because, of course, in the States, they I think recently they passed that they were able to use fluoride directly as a fertilizer. So while they were retracting the fluoride from a lot of the water supply, they were just dumping it on the crops. And of course, you're still eating it. You're still getting it into your system in concentrated dosages. So do you know if that's sort of the same situation in England and Ireland and in Europe, that they can just spray it willy-nilly onto our crops, or is there some sort of regulations that they can't?
Well, if the water's fluoridated, they'll automatically be spraying it on your crops at that point. As for the pesticides, all the pesticides that they use on the crops are fluoridated for the most part, because the pesticides all use it as a killing agent. Sodium fluoride, believe it or not, is actually sold to be used along the docks to kill mice and rats.
Yeah, I've actually I've shown friends that was one way that I got somebody that I know off of fluoride toothpaste. He was basically we're at a job, and he was like, oh, I need some rat poison, so I passed him a tube of toothpaste, and I said, there mate, it's the same ingredients. And sure enough, he went and bought some rat poison, and once he saw that it was the same basic ingredient, I think that swore him off it. But it is literally that sort of ludicrous that we're putting rat poison into our food and drink.
Well, the toothpaste is nothing more than rat poison in a tube, to my mind, because sodium fluoride is a rat poison. And in America now, by federal law, they're forced to put a poison warning on all fluoridated toothpaste tubes. And I think in Canada as well. And it now says, if you look at the back of yours, it says you should use no more than a pea-sized amount. You should supervise toothbrushing and make sure your child spits it all out. Make sure he doesn't swallow it. Ours goes a little further. The American toothpaste tubes now say if he accidentally swallows more than the pea-sized amount, you should contact a poison control center immediately. And then it gives you a 1-800 number that brings you through to the Pittsburgh Poison Control Center. That's by federal law, and the reason is that there's enough fluoride, believe it or not, in a tube of toothpaste to kill an 11-year-old child virtually all the way down. And the killing dose for a child is 1/5 of a level teaspoon. That's how much of fluoride is in that tube, is 1/5 of a level teaspoon, and that's a lethal dose for a child. And for an adult, it's 1/3 of a level teaspoon. That's the lethal dose for an adult. So you've got enough fluoride. If the child ate the whole tube, he would die. But he'll probably go unconscious and maybe into a coma before he gets to the end of the tube. And that's why they have the poison warning on, to cover themselves against lawsuits. So I would get rid of your toothpaste tube. I'd get rid of your mouthwashes and anything else that has this in it. And when the dentist comes to you and he says, I want to paint this on your teeth, you tell him to get lost. No, you don't want it. Stop taking this stuff in. And when you find a dentist who doesn't use it, and one question we started asking all the dentists here, and this is a basic question you would expect them to know the answer to. We asked them, how does this work? How does this find its way to teeth only? How does this work? That is a basic question to ask them. The dentists don't even know the name of the chemical being put in the water supply. They don't know where it comes from. They know nothing about this. Their dental journals have just been promoting this as fluoride. So they don't know that it's hydrofluorosilicic acid, the toxic waste of the phosphate fertilizer. They have no idea of any of this. They're so naive, and they're promoting something they don't actually understand how it works. How does it change the teeth only? How does it do this? What biological mechanism does that chemical use to find its way to teeth only? And that's what we asked in every council in Northern Ireland. That's why they all voted against it. And again, it is a breach of human rights. That's quite clear. Nobody has the right to drug you against your will for any reason. Mm-hmm. And hey, this isn't the elixir to life, This is just, we're trying to prevent cavities here. And cavities are not life-threatening. if all of your teeth fall out, you get dentures and life goes on. You know, a lot better than having cancer.
Well, yeah, it's well, you're preaching to the choir here, but I think it's great for this sort of show because what we're getting is it's on everyone's mind now.
Yeah.
And hopefully everybody that's listening will go out and either talk to someone or call their local...
Get down the garage.
Well, yeah, get down the... But that is really where things are going to change is from direct input. And it's not something that we can just go on the sideline. A lot of this stuff in the movement that you can sort of let slide, but this is something that's directly going to kill you. It's not in games.
No.
So it's something that's totally vital that we just make sure it gets the hell out of any of our food, any of our water. We don't want it in any of our, the problem is with the pesticides and all that, it's very difficult to avoid then because of course, even if you're eating very healthily, you're still ingesting this stuff, but at least we can try and minimalize it until it's outright banned, which I think may take some time because these guys are really persistent, and I think they have quite a lot of motives in making sure people are sick and dying, to be honest. But
and the thing I just want to say too is the quantity they're putting it in at. They're putting it in at 1 part per million, which is like a pin dot in a swimming pool. And just to show you how seriously toxic this stuff is, they daren't go over that 1 part per million. And the reason is, I now have in front of me, it's the British Medical Association's New Guide to Medicines and Drugs, 3rd edition, 1994. Under fluoride, it goes down to symptoms and risks of excess intake. Now wait till you hear what an excess intake is. It says in large quantities, fluoride may cause slow poisoning. This is their own terms. Termed fluorosis. You know that dental fluorosis I told you about? Prolonged intake of water containing more than 2 parts per million, that's 2 pin dots, may lead to mottled or brown discoloration of the enamel of developing teeth. Now, that goes on to say that very high levels, guess what a high level is? One part per million is supposedly safe and is good for your teeth.
They've done so well.
Wow.
Sorry, mate, continue for a sec.
So, somebody's turned into a werewolf on your end. So, anyway, as I was saying, 1 part per million is the safe dose. At 2 parts per million, it causes slow poisoning termed dental fluorosis. At 8 parts per million, now get this, in large quantities, at 8 parts per million, it may also lead to bone disorders and degenerative changes in the kidneys, liver, adrenal glands, heart, central nervous system, and reproductive organs. So you're telling me at 1 part per million, 1 pin dot, it's perfectly safe and good for teeth. At 2 pin dots, it destroys the teeth. And at 8 pin dots, it destroys the rest of the whole human body.
And of course, they've got no way of, as we said before, they've got no way of knowing that one household is going to get the 1 pin drop or one household is going to get, 3 or 4 because, they're basically just dumping it into the water and, it's going to distribute itself however it is.
Of course. It may all turn left at the first house and they get it all.
Yeah.
There's no way of controlling it over 6,000 miles of pipes. And they have done tests and they have found the people living closest to the factories get the most of it. And it diminishes to the guy at the end probably gets virtually none. So there's no controlling the dose here and any one day it could change. Yeah.
Can you just confirm that the stuff people can go and buy if they want to go and buy some distilled water over here, there's no acid in it for charging batteries or anything, is there?
No. No, it makes the battery cells make it into an acid. It's just distilled water. Mm-hmm. But it can't have the chemicals in it because it'll cause corrosion. It'll do all kinds of damage in there. Whereas the distilled water won't cause corrosion. That's why you use it in your iron. If you have an electric iron that puts out steam, you should be using distilled water, not tap water. Yeah, because the tap water won't destroy the inside of the iron. And that's probably the same principle for you too. And I know people in the Republic of Ireland who've had themselves tested, and they've come up positive that distilled water is positive for them and health-giving, and tap water is not health-giving. And I know we did a talk in my town where I live in Northern Ireland, And we had a farmer stand up, and he had a dairy herd. And he decided to do a test on them because he noticed that they would not drink the tap water that was being put into the troughs. They would hold off drinking, and even on a hot day, they wouldn't drink it. And if he opened the gate, they'd all run down to the nearest puddle or to the stream and drink like hell. But they wouldn't drink the tap water. So the animals are able to smell the chemicals. They know that this stuff is toxic. We've lost our ability to really realize this anymore. We don't smell it. We just start drinking the stuff. We don't even question it. And that's the amazing thing. But the distilled water, I think, is the way to go if you're certainly in a fluoridated area. And I think even in non-fluoridated, because they're putting a lot of chemicals in, you'd be shocked.
Yeah, well, like I said, Walter, even we're not fluoridated here, but even here, once we started adding, when you distill the water, you obviously get all the gunk left over, and it was shocking. You definitely need to, no matter where you live, unless you're taking your water from a clear spring well or from a lake source, you really need to get some filtration in there, whether it's gravity fed, which will take out pretty much everything but fluoride unless you buy a very expensive filter. But I mean, they're still good. Or distilling, because all that stuff, all that junk goes into your body. The same way your body extracts minerals and vitamins and keeps it going, it still has to contend with all that chemical junk that has been put into it. So it's essential for your health. You can eat all the right food, but if you're drinking that and your body is mostly water, you're drinking all those chemicals, it's going to kill you, and it's going to kill you fast, and it's not worth it. There are alternatives. We can sort of nip this in the butt. It's just one of those things of moving away from complacency, where you don't actively think of where your water comes from. You just drink it from the tap, and to say, right, this is a serious thing, and we've, obviously, you got to avoid it. So it's something that we can do. It's something we can proactively get on top of. This entire water thing, we can write letters. We can talk to our council people. We can make our voices heard, and we can also make sure that our family aren't drinking it. We're filtering it out. Yeah. It's going to take that sort of action, and it's positive action because we're actually talking about it. And 10 years ago there was a lot less people talking about it.
Exactly.
So it's great.
We're running low on time now, Walter. But as I say, if you want to get anything over to us, any articles or anything, we'll get them onto the libertytactics.com website.
Okay.
And then we can, we'll keep in touch and see how the campaign's going. And you're welcome any time. I know all the listeners are grateful for the information, and the more people we can kind of make aware of this, the better.
Well, I give you two other websites. One is the fluoridealert.org. That's fluoridealert.org. That's a chemist who's put it up. That's a general one that does America. It does, anybody can tap into it. And they've got a lot of resource in there that you can download information. You can find out what's happening in other parts of the world as well. So if you were going on holiday to somewhere, you could find out if it was fluoridated before you got there.
Can you just repeat that website again, Walter?
It's fluoridealert.org. Fluoridealert.org. And another one is the National Health Federation. I think it's NHF.com.
That's Scott Tips. He's been a guest on My Little Monday show. But yeah, we'll get him on here. And Scott Tips is a great advocate for health, for fluoride, for Codex Alimentarius. Well, all the guys at the NHF are. So definitely a good place to look for info on the NHF website.
Okay, Walter, we'll have you again. And like I say, if you guys need any help, Liberty Tactics is there. We're gonna kick this fluoride out of
and we'll get this podcasted up on the. We'll have it on our iTunes app, and we'll get it onto TNS as well in the podcast room as well. So we'll get all this, and we'll get this over to you, Walter. And as soon as you've got a website set up, give it to us. We'll get it onto the Liberty Tactics site and onto to give it to TNS as well.
Well, thanks for doing that. I appreciate it because we need to get this out there. It's got to be attacked. They can't get away with drugging you against your will. Not in the year 2012. This is incredible what's going on. You would expect this in probably Russia or somewhere, But here
it's telling when the Russians and the Chinese are actually are saying no. This is too dangerous for our people.
believe it or not, the Chinese and the Indian government, they actually actively take out fluoride out of all of their water systems. Because the research that's come out of India and out of China have shown them that it causes neurological damage, cancer, and so on. And so they've started taking it out of all their water systems. And these are poor countries, and they're doing it. And
There's no excuse for it. Anyways, Walter, we're out of time. We'll get you next time.
Thank you so much, Walter, and we'll take care.
Sunburn, it's just...
Yeah. Well, you see, I mean, here's the ridiculous part of it. This is passing the teeth at 100 miles an hour when you drink it.
Yeah.
It doesn't come in with a little tag that says teeth only. It's water soluble. It's going into every cell of your body. Now, it has access to every cell of your body. And you're telling me, magically, it finds its way only to your teeth. And it drastically changes them, making them harder. But it touches nothing else in the whole human body. Does that sound possible or likely? It's an impossibility. Of course, if it can drastically change your teeth, it must be drastically changing other things, too, because it's in every cell of your body now.
Absolutely. And the thing is, I mean, there's an interesting something. We've got a little chat box going, and someone said they don't force us to drink the water. But, I mean, that's every human being's right, that we have to pay our water rates. We have to pay for the water. I mean, really, surely it's everybody's human right
not
to be able to have access to water.
Absolutely, and you can't avoid it. I don't care where you are. If they put this in the water system, you're going to get it, because once it's in the water, it's in your pasta. Once it's in the water, it's in your rice. Once it's in the water, it's in every food or beverage that is manufactured using that water supply. Plus, you're going to bathe in it. You're going to have showers in it. You're going to, it's going to be in your clothing because you're going to wash your clothes in it. There's no way you're going to avoid this. And of course, even if you got a distillation unit or some kind of a reverse osmosis for your house to avoid it, you'll get it when you go out. You'll go at somebody's house or you'll get it in a restaurant. There's no way to avoid this stuff. Once they start putting it in the water supply, you're going to get it. So, the other thing I'd say too, just to clarify this thing even further, which I think is kind of outrageous. You've got the dentists who are promoting this like crazy, don't you? I
got told, when I told the dentist that I didn't let my kids use fluoride, she told me she was disgusting and she considered it a form of neglect.
Yeah,
there you go. She told me. I mean, obviously, I went straight away and changed dentist. But I mean, she made me feel so shitty, as I was walking out there, because I want to protect my children. I don't want them using the toothpaste, we're lucky where we're living down in the southwest.
Then they refused to stop, so we marched again. About 4 weeks later, we marched on Stormont again. Again, we appeared on television. Then we did a march to the health board, and we did a protest in front of the health board. Then we did a protest on Royal Avenue. And suddenly they saw that we were serious, and they backed out. They were afraid of the publicity. That's the last thing they want. The government doesn't want you to look at this. They don't want you to pay attention to it. They want you to stay asleep and let them put it in.
Well, yeah, fluoridation only really stands up to no scrutiny, because once you start looking into it even remotely, you realize that the positives, which I think are mostly bogus anyways, are certainly not worth the massive risks that it takes. I mean, even if you just look at the 1 part per million, which is the sort of harmless figure that they always throw out there, there's no physical way that they can make sure that one house gets 1 part per million next to the next, because they're basically dumping bags or barrels of this into the water supply, and some houses will end up getting massive concentrations of it, and others will be luckier and have less. So, I mean, it's just madness. But
and
sorry, I was just going to say, do you want to run through the list of dangers, or just give the listeners some of the dangers that fluoride that's involved with water in fluoride in the water?
Well, I should clear one thing up first, because there's a misconception. A lot of times when you say fluoride, people think of chlorine, the chemical that they're adding into the water system to purify the water, to kill off pathogens or viruses and stuff. That's not what this is. This is fluoride, which is only being put in specifically. They say it might, and I repeat, might, reduce tooth decay in small adolescent children. That's the excuse they use to put this in. But the scientific studies that are actually out there and this is going to be the hard bit for your listeners to believe, prove that there's almost 4,000 studies. They prove that it causes osteoporosis, arthritis, it causes irritable bowel syndrome, it causes thyroid dysfunction.
Walter Graham is, I met him at the Strike a Chord event in Dunstable where he gave a great talk, and he's really delighted that he's joining us now. Afternoon, Walter.
Afternoon, Lila.
How you doing?
Doing good.
Good. For the listeners who may not have heard of you, could you give a little bit about your background and how you came to campaign for, it's Northern Ireland, is it?
Northern Ireland, yeah.
For Northern Ireland, for them to stop water fluoridisation, and how you got there, and just a little bit about your background, please.
Yeah, I was doing pharmaceutical marketing at the time that they announced that they were going to bring fluoridation, or that's the addition of fluoride, the chemical fluoride, into the water system here in Northern Ireland. And one of the basic principles of pharmacology is that there is no such thing as a drug that doesn't have side effects. And yet the government was claiming on radio and television and in the newspapers that there was no side effects to putting in what was one of the most toxic substances in the periodic table or on Earth, is the fluoride. And in the form they're putting it in, it's extremely toxic. But none of this was mentioned in the article. They said there was no side effects at all. If they could put this in, 1 part per million, there'd be no effects at all. And that's a lie. That's not possible. Every drug has side effects. Aspirin has 6 or 7 side effects. So everything has side effects. You can't name one that doesn't. Some of them have 30, 40 side effects. And here was one that was the most toxic substance, and they were claiming it had no side effects. So I knew they were lying.
So how long ago was this? Sorry, Walter.
It was about 12 years ago that it actually started for me. And at that point, I just wrote in a letter to the government, and I wrote in a letter to one of the newspapers because I thought I should try and get somebody else to pay attention to this. And the government wrote back with the most silly replies, and I realized we had a problem. They gave us a 3-month consultation period to go before our councils. Our councils were supposed to make the decision. So I then took off time from work, and I went to the councils on the same night as they went to the councils with doctors and dentists and a slideshow and all kinds of stuff with music. It was incredible. Even depression. It causes all kinds of other illnesses, including cancers of different kinds. It causes an increase in cancers of all kinds. It causes neurological damage and lowered IQs in children. And I don't know if I said it, but thyroid dysfunction. So you've got a huge list of things, and I could probably go on, of ailments that are attached to it.
Oh, isn't it classed as even more poisonous to the brain as mercury, I've read recently?
Yeah, it's more toxic than lead.
And there was the Harvard paper that just recently came out that even pretty much said so.
Yes, they said that it did damage to the brain of children or anybody that takes this. It does neurological damage, and there's now 26 peer-reviewed published studies that show that fluoride lowers children's IQs. And I'm going to read from one of them, just the first sentence, which is quite shocking. Now, there's 3 studies were done in China in a row, and the Chinese couldn't believe the first results. They did studies comparing fluoridated with non-fluoridated areas, looking at children's intelligence compared to their parents' intelligence and so on. And they found that fluoride reduced the children's intelligence by something nearing 15 points. And it says, this is the first line of the study, a Chinese study now. It says, it has been reported that fluoride can penetrate the fetal blood-brain barrier and accumulate in cerebral tissue before birth, thereby apparently affecting children's intelligence. So now you're telling me we're putting something in the water supply that can jump the placenta, penetrate the fetal blood-brain barrier, and accumulate in the cerebral tissue of a fetus before birth. Now, does this sound like it has anything to do with teeth? This is incredible what they're doing. And there's no science backing up anything that they're telling you. That's the amazing thing.
There's
but you
some
don't
sort of persuasive science that it helps when there's not actually any data that I've ever seen to prove it. And even if it was, if it had a topical benefit, it would be akin to drinking suntan lotion, to prevent skin.
And at the end of the 3-month consultation period, I had 25 out of 26 councils vote against water fluoridation. We had the 4 area health and social services councils vote against it. We had NIPSA, the large civil servants union, vote against it. We had the Angling Federation vote against this. We had the 2 farmers unions vote against it. We had the Vegetarian Society against it. Queen's Student Union voted against it. And even Shorts, the large aerospace industry, they threatened to pull out of Northern Ireland if this went ahead. So we had widespread opposition.
Right. Okay. So that was you. So obviously that's not a Northern Ireland accent. How long have you been in Northern Ireland, Walter?
We've been here at least 22 years.
Wow. Okay. So you were doing the pharmaceuticals. So how did you get to where you are now and what you're doing now, going around speaking?
Just by sheer perseverance. That's what happened. They didn't give up. After we won all the councils, the government said, we don't care what the councils think. We're going to do it anyway. So then I realized this was going to be a longer battle. I then organized the councils in Northern Ireland into a coalition of councils against fluoridation in order to use public money to sue them.
Yeah.
They then sent a letter to all the councils saying you can't use money to sue them or we'll put you in jail, this kind of stuff. So then we started networking through the councils, meeting every 2 weeks up at Belfast City Hall, and we started writing to groups to try and get support for what we were doing, trying to stand up against this. So the fight then really started. And I was forced onto television when we started to march. We got people on the street to march. We got placards. We went up to Stormont, which is our Capitol building, and we marched up there. It's about a mile up to the front of the building. So we had about 150 people march up to the front of that building with a coffin that said truth and democracy. That's what was dead. And we had skull and crossbones on it. And we marched up to the front of the Capitol building and we handed in documents proving fluoride was harmful, scientific studies. They refused to even answer any of our questions, which we had put